My brother shattered my ribs. Mom whispered, "Stay quiet. He has a future." But my doctor didn't hesitate. Hey, Reddit. My brother put me in the hospital with 3 broken ribs. My parents begged me to cover it up. But my doctor made one phone call that destroyed everything. What followed was 2 years of family warfare that proved blood doesn't mean loyalty. Here's the whole story. I'm Sophie, 27 now, but this disaster started 2 years ago in Riverside, Oregon. Population around 8,000. One of those timber towns where the mill whistle still dictates lunch breaks, and everyone knows your business before you do. The kind of place where reputations matter more than reality, and keeping up appearances is practically a religion. My family was Riverside royalty. Dad owned Fletcher Hardware on Main Street. Been in business 30 years. Cornerstone of the community. The kind of store where contractors get their morning coffee and farmers debate rainfall predictions. Mom chaired every church committee, organized every bake sale, ran every charity drive. Her photo was in the local paper at least twice a month accepting donations or cutting ribbons or presenting oversized checks. Then there was my older brother Blake, 30 now, the golden child who could do absolutely no wrong. Star quarterback who led Riverside High to state championships 2 years running. Full academic ride to state university. Business degree with honors. Internships at Fortune 500 companies. Job offers before graduation. The kid was basically walking proof that the American dream worked if you just applied yourself. Me? I was the afterthought daughter who painted in the garage and worked part-time shelving books at the public library for $11 an hour. My greatest accomplishment, according to my parents, was not causing problems. That was literally how Mom introduced me at church functions. This is Sophie, our quiet one. She doesn't cause problems like some kids these days. The family dynamic was established early and never changed. Blake was the investment. I was the backup plan nobody wanted to cash in. Every resource, every ounce of attention, every moment of pride flowed in one direction, and it wasn't toward me. Elementary school. Blake got signed up for traveling football leagues that required 2-hour drives each weekend, cost hundreds in fees, equipment, uniforms. I asked to take art classes at the community center. Mom said we couldn't afford it. That same month, they bought Blake a complete set of weight training equipment for the garage. Middle school. Blake's room got renovated with new furniture, fresh paint, shelving for all his awards. My room got hand-me-down furniture from garage sales and walls that hadn't been painted since I was 6. When I asked about redecorating, Dad said my room was fine. What did I need to impress anyone for? I wasn't bringing scouts home. High school, Blake's football games were mandatory family events. Mom made matching t-shirts. Dad rearranged his work schedule to never miss a game. They traveled to away games 4 hours from home. I had an art show at the community center showcasing a year's worth of work. Mom had book club. Dad had inventory at the store. Blake had football practice. I went alone and pretended it didn't hurt when other kids' families showed up to support them. The pattern was clear. Blake mattered. I existed. His achievements validated their parenting. My achievements were footnotes mentioned briefly, then forgotten. He got celebrated. I got compared unfavorably to his standard. Every family dinner featured updates on Blake's latest success. Scholarship offers, game statistics, college acceptance letters, internship opportunities. I learned to sit quietly and eat while they discussed his bright future. On the rare occasions someone asked about my plans, I'd barely finish one sentence before Mom redirected conversation back to Blake's more interesting life. I learned early that love in my family came with conditions. Blake's condition was simply existing. Mine was being invisible enough not to distract from his spotlight. Complain about unfair treatment? Stop being jealous of your brother's success. Ask for equal support? Stop being selfish when Blake needs this opportunity. Express hurt feelings? Stop being dramatic and attention-seeking. By the time I was 16, I'd stopped trying to compete for attention I'd never receive. Retreated completely into art, into books, into internal worlds where I controlled the narrative, and my worth wasn't measured against Blake's accomplishments. Spent most of high school painting in the garage studio I'd created from salvaged furniture and discount supplies. Graduation brought the ultimate proof of my status. Blake got a huge party with catered food, relatives driving in from 3 states, gifts totaling thousands of dollars. Professional photographer, live music, the works. His graduation was treated like a national holiday. My graduation? Dinner at a chain restaurant, card with $50, then home early because Blake had a football training camp starting the next morning that required early preparation. Mom spent my graduation dinner discussing Blake's training schedule and what equipment he'd need. Dad talked about how proud he was that Blake was taking his athletic career seriously. I moved out at 23 into a studio apartment above a dental office, 450 square feet that smelled vaguely of antiseptic, but was mine. Took the library job full-time, picked up freelance illustration work when I could find it, barely scraped by financially, but at least wasn't performing daily invisibility in my parents' house. Relationship with my family became purely transactional after that. Show up for mandatory gatherings, smile appropriately, deflect personal questions, endure comparisons to Blake's achievements, leave as early as socially acceptable, go home and paint away the resentment. Blake and I had never been close. Not really. As kids, there were moments, brief flashes where he'd act like an actual brother, teaching me to ride a bike, letting me hang out with his friends occasionally, defending me once when some kid at school made fun of my art. But those moments faded as his star rose, and mine stayed firmly planted in mediocrity. By the time we were adults, our relationship was defined entirely by family obligation and mutual indifference. He viewed me as the weird little sister who never amounted to anything. I viewed him as the golden child who'd absorbed all the family resources and emotional energy, leaving nothing for anyone else. He'd gotten worse after college. Success had inflated his ego beyond recognition, would come home for holidays and hold court like visiting royalty, regaling everyone with stories about his Seattle apartment, his salary, his networking events, his gym routine, his meal prep strategies, his investment portfolio. Everything framed as humble brags wrapped in false modesty. Yeah, the penthouse is nice, but honestly, I barely notice the view anymore when I'm grinding on projects. The BMW was a practical choice, really. More reliable than people think. Salary's good, but I'm more focused on building equity through strategic networking. Every sentence carefully crafted to remind everyone present that he'd made it while they were still stuck in Riverside, population 8,000, where making 40 grand a year was considered doing well. The worst part was watching my parents absorb every word like he was delivering wisdom from on high. Dad would nod seriously, taking mental notes. Mom would beam with pride, occasionally interjecting with details about his childhood that supposedly predicted his current success. Everyone acted like his achievements were communal victories, rather than individual accomplishments that came at everyone else's expense. Meanwhile, I could mention landing a freelance contract, designing a logo for a local business, something that actually mattered to my career development, and get a distracted "that's nice" before conversation pivoted back to Blake's more important life. That dynamic made September 15th particularly devastating. It wasn't just physical violence. It was the final, definitive proof that when forced to choose between their children, my parents would pick Blake every single time, even when he was objectively, undeniably wrong. The incident happened during a family cookout celebrating Blake's early acceptance into some elite consulting firm's senior analyst program. Big deal, apparently, very competitive. Guaranteed 6 figures plus bonuses. Prestigious client list. Potential partnership track. Mom had been planning this party for 3 weeks like she was organizing a wedding reception. The backyard looked ridiculous. Blue and silver balloons everywhere, his college colors. Elaborate buffet spread featuring expensive meats, gourmet sides, dessert table that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She'd invited extended family, neighbors, church friends, Dad's business associates, probably 40 people total, all gathered to celebrate Blake's continued success. I showed up with a sheet cake from the grocery store bakery, $42 that hurt my budget, but seemed like minimum expected contribution. Wore my decent jeans without holes, clean shirt that didn't scream poverty, tried to look presentable enough not to embarrass the family. Blake was already center stage when I arrived, surrounded by admirers asking about the new position. He looked annoyingly good. Fitted designer polo, expensive watch catching sunlight, haircut that probably cost more than my entire outfit, success radiating off him like cologne. Waited for a break in conversation before approaching with my cake. Congratulations, Blake. This is really amazing. Proud of you. Simple, genuine, zero hidden agenda. He turned, looked me up and down with this expression I couldn't quite read, then smirked. Don't sound so jealous, Soph. You'll figure your life out someday. Maybe. A few relatives laughed nervously. Dad clapped Blake on the shoulder like he delivered a brilliant punchline. Mom busied herself rearranging napkins, pretending not to hear. Heat crawled up my neck, but I forced a smile, nodded, walked away. Not worth making a scene at his celebration. Spent the next 2 hours playing invisible support staff. Helped Mom in the kitchen, carried dishes, refilled drinks, cleared plates, performed all the domestic labor expected of daughters at family events. Meanwhile, Blake entertained guests with stories about his interview process, how the hiring manager was impressed by his strategic thinking, what his new apartment in Seattle's downtown financial district would look like. Around 8 p.m., I was carrying a stack of paper plates toward the kitchen when Blake appeared in the doorway, blocking my path. House was mostly empty at that moment, everyone outside watching Dad attempt to grill without burning everything. Just us in the kitchen, alone. "Why'd you talk to Katie about me last week?" His voice was low, sharp, accusatory. Katie was his girlfriend of 6 months. Nice girl who always seemed slightly uncomfortable at family gatherings. "She called asking if you were okay," I said, genuinely confused. "You'd sounded stressed on the phone. I just said you probably had a lot on your mind with the new job. You told her I was drinking too much. She asked if you were drinking more lately because your voice sounded rough. I said you were probably just stressed from work deadlines. That's literally all I said." Wrong answer, apparently. His expression shifted into something cold, dangerous. "You don't discuss me with my girlfriend. You don't analyze my life. You don't comment on my behavior. You barely have your own life together, and you're offering observations about mine? Blake, I really wasn't trying to stay out of my business." He stepped forward into my personal space, aggressive posture making alarm bells scream in my head. I stepped back reflexively, plates still balanced in my hands. My back hit the counter edge, nowhere left to retreat. He was close now, too close, invading space in a way that made my entire nervous system scream danger. "I wasn't trying to cause problems," I said, keeping my voice calm despite my racing heart. "Katie was worried about you. She asked me directly. I gave her a benign answer that supported you. That's all that happened. You were being nosy." His hands came up fast, both palms hitting my shoulders, shoving hard. The force sent me backward into the counter edge at exactly wrong angle. I heard the crack distinct and horrible before pain registered. Then agony exploded across my chest like lightning strike, white hot and overwhelming. Plates clattered to tile floor, shattering. I couldn't breathe, couldn't stand. Slid down cabinet, clutching my ribs, gasping like a fish. Every attempt to inhale felt like knives between my ribs. Shallow gasps barely brought oxygen. Vision tunneled. Through ringing in my ears, I heard Blake swear creatively, then Mom's voice getting closer. She rushed in, took in the scene instantly. Me crumpled on floor, Blake standing over me, looking somewhere between panicked and angry. Broken plates scattered everywhere. "What happened?" she demanded, voice sharp. "She tripped," Blake said immediately, smoothly, like he'd prepared this answer. "Carrying too many plates. Lost her balance." I tried to speak but couldn't get enough air. Just wheezed pathetically while Mom knelt beside me, her hand immediately going to Blake's arm. Protective gesture, already choosing her side. "Sophie, what happened?" She was looking at me now, but that hand stayed on Blake's arm, anchor point to her decision. "He pushed me," I managed between gasps. "Into the counter, can't breathe." Mom's face changed. Not shock, not anger, fear. The specific fear of someone realizing their perfect image has developed visible cracks that can't be easily plastered over. She leaned close, voice dropping to barely audible whisper. "Stay quiet. He has a future." 6 words that hurt worse than 3 broken ribs. Worse than any physical pain I'd experienced in my entire life, because in that moment, crystal clear, she'd announced my worth in this family. Blake's career, reputation, future mattered more than my immediate suffering, my safety, my well-being, my basic human dignity. Dad appeared from the backyard, took in the scene, listened to Blake's version of events, helped me to the couch while Mom made strategic excuses to concerned guests. Sophie had tripped. Clumsy moment. Nothing serious. These things happen. Guests cleared out within 30 minutes, sensing uncomfortable family tension. Blake disappeared upstairs to his childhood bedroom. I sat on the couch wrapped in throw blanket that smelled like detergent. Every breath absolute agony, while my parents discussed the situation in hushed voices in the kitchen. Caught fragments through my pain fog. "Can't let this get out. You know how people talk in this town. He didn't mean to hurt her. She'll heal fine in a few days. His career is just starting." Around 10 p.m., Dad drove me to my apartment in silence. Helped me inside, told me to rest, take some over-the-counter pain meds, call if I needed anything, then left. No hospital, no x-rays, no doctor visit, just silent family agreement that we'd all pretend Blake's violence was an unfortunate accident, and I'd heal quietly without making noise that might damage his reputation. My phone buzzed constantly that night. Mom offering to bring pain medication. Dad saying not to blow this out of proportion. Everyone was emotional at parties. These things happen in families. No need for drama. Blake never called. I spent that endless night alone in my studio apartment, clutching my side, taking shallow breaths, watching bruising spread like spilled ink across my ribs. Every movement brought fresh waves of pain. Couldn't lie down without feeling like I was suffocating. Couldn't sit up without triggering muscle spasms. Couldn't find any position that didn't hurt. The next morning, I could barely lift my arm to brush my teeth. The bruising had turned spectacular shades of purple, black, green, yellow. My entire right side looked like someone had beaten me with a bat. Each breath was calculated, measured, trying to find minimum expansion that would allow oxygen without triggering stabbing sensation. At 6:15 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and drove myself to St. Catherine's Clinic. Every pothole was fresh stabbing pain. Every turn made me want to scream. Every traffic light where I had to brake carefully felt like torture. The 15-minute drive felt like hours of acute suffering. The clinic was mostly empty that early on Saturday morning. Just one older man coughing into his elbow and one mother with feverish toddler. I checked in at the front desk, gave my insurance information, sat in those uncomfortable plastic chairs, trying desperately not to move in any direction. Dr. Morrison called me back around 7 a.m. Mid-40s, calm professional demeanor, kind eyes but no-nonsense expression. The kind of doctor who'd seen everything twice and didn't waste time with social pleasantries when someone was clearly suffering. She had me describe the incident while she examined me, her hands gentle but professional, pressing carefully along my ribs, listening to my lungs through a stethoscope, watching my face for pain reactions. When she pressed the area where I'd hit the counter, I cried out involuntarily. Couldn't help it. 2 fractures minimum, she said, making notes on her tablet. Possibly 3. We'll confirm with imaging. Can you tell me exactly how this injury occurred? Standard question. Routine medical inquiry. But something in my throat closed up completely. Years of family training kicked in automatically. Don't embarrass the family. Don't make waves. Don't be dramatic. Keep family business private. Protect Blake's future. Maintain the perfect image. An accident, I whispered. I fell. Clumsy. Dr. Morrison stopped writing. Looked up slowly. Her eyes were kind but penetrating. The look of someone who knows exactly when they're being lied to. Who's heard every variation of I fell and I'm just clumsy, and it was an accident, from patients trying to protect their abusers. Sophie, she said calmly, who did this to you? The directness caught me completely off guard. No dancing around the question, no gentle prodding, no letting me maintain the lie. Just straight question demanding straight answer, cutting through years of trained family loyalty with surgical precision. My brother, I said quietly, tears starting. He shoved me into the counter, at a family party. My parents want me to keep it quiet. She didn't blink, didn't react with shock or pearl-clutching surprise, just nodded once, professional acknowledgement, and picked up the phone on the wall. You're safe now, she said while dialing. I need to make a call. This is procedure. The x-rays confirmed 3 broken ribs, one with concerning displacement that was dangerously close to puncturing my lung. Dr. Morrison explained the risks in clear terms, healing timeline, need for careful monitoring, warning signs of complications. But she also explained something else that made my stomach drop to my knees. As a medical professional, she was a mandatory reporter. When injuries suggested assault or domestic violence, she was legally required to report it to law enforcement authorities. My case would go to the police whether I wanted it to or not. The decision had been taken out of my hands the moment I told her the truth. My family will hate me, I said, tears finally breaking through completely. She sat down on the exam table stool, met my eyes directly. They already chose your brother over you. Now it's time to choose yourself. That afternoon, 2 police officers showed up at Fletcher Hardware, where Blake was helping Dad with Saturday inventory. By evening, my phone was absolutely exploding with notifications. Mom called first, sobbing hysterically. Do you realize what you've done? His career could be over before it starts. Everything we've worked for, everything he's accomplished, you're going to destroy it over an accident? How could you do this to your own brother? He broke 3 of my ribs, I said flatly. It was a misunderstanding. He didn't mean to hurt you. You're being vindictive because you're jealous of his success. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You've always been jealous. I hung up without responding. Dad's voicemail was colder, more calculated, exactly what I'd expect from someone who'd spent decades building a business through careful relationship management. Fix this immediately. Call the police back. Retract your statement. Tell them you misunderstood what happened, that you exaggerated, that it was an accident. This kind of thing can ruin a young man's future, destroy his career before it starts. I know you don't want that on your conscience. Fix it. Blake finally texted around 9 p.m. Hope you're happy. You just ruined everything. Congratulations on destroying your own family. This is what you wanted, right? But I wasn't the one who destroyed anything. He did that when he decided his anger mattered more than my physical safety. He made that choice, not me. The next few weeks were absolute hell. My parents stopped calling after I refused repeatedly to change my statement. Extended family members started reaching out with concerns, all variations of the same basic message. Drop the charges, protect Blake's future, don't be vindictive, forgive and forget, family comes first, blood is thicker than water, don't destroy his life over one mistake. My aunt actually showed up at my apartment unannounced to lecture me about forgiveness and the importance of moving past grudges. When I lifted my shirt to show her the spectacular bruising still covering my entire torso, she went visibly pale, but still insisted I was making it bigger than it needed to be, that Blake hadn't meant to hurt me, that pressing charges was excessive. The investigation dragged for 3 long months. Police interviewed witnesses who'd been at the party. Several people remembered seeing me doubled over in pain that night. A few mentioned Blake had seemed agitated earlier in the evening. The medical records were undeniable proof of serious injury. Timeline matched my statement perfectly. Physical evidence supported my version of events completely. Blake hired an expensive attorney who immediately pushed for dismissal, claiming it was an accident during a heated but normal sibling discussion. My attorney, provided through victim services, pushed back with medical evidence, witness statements, and expert testimony about injury patterns. Eventually, Blake's attorney convinced him to take a plea deal rather than risk going to trial, where a jury would see photos of my injuries and hear testimony from Dr. Morrison. Assault in the 4th degree, 2 years probation, mandatory anger management classes, restraining order preventing him from coming within 500 feet of me. Complete slap on the wrist compared to what he'd actually done, but it was the first time in Blake's entire privileged life that he'd faced any consequences for anything. The day he took the plea, Mom left in voicemail dripping with vindictive satisfaction despite the tears. I hope you're satisfied now. You've completely ruined your brother's life. That consulting firm rescinded his offer. He's living at home now, applying for jobs with a criminal record, all because you couldn't let an accident go. All because you had to be vindictive. He broke my ribs, I said to my empty apartment. Christmas came. I wasn't invited to family dinner for the first time in my entire life. Mom posted photos on social media of Blake, Dad, and herself around the table, looking somber, but united against outside forces. Caption mentioned difficult times and staying strong as a family. Several relatives commented with support and prayers. Nobody mentioned me. I'd been edited out of the family narrative completely. I spent Christmas alone in my apartment, eating Chinese takeout and painting. Should have felt lonely and depressing. Instead, it felt like freedom from performance, from judgment, from constantly managing other people's expectations and emotions at my own expense. Mom's last direct communication came via text message in January. Family comes first. You chose yourself over all of us. I hope you can live with that decision. I finally replied after a week. Exactly. And you didn't choose me. I hope you can live with that. After that, complete silence. No birthday calls, no holiday cards, no random check-ins, no accidental run-ins that weren't actually accidental. I ceased to exist in their world except as the vindictive daughter who destroyed their golden son's future over petty grudges and jealousy. Blake violated the restraining order twice in those first 6 months. First time, showed up at my apartment at 2 a.m., clearly intoxicated, pounding on the door, screaming about how I'd ruined his life, how everything was my fault, how I'd always been jealous of him. Neighbors called police. He spent the night in jail. Violation extended his probation. Second violation was accidentally showing up at the same coffee shop where I was meeting a friend. Made intense eye contact across the room, didn't approach physically, but made his presence known. Made sure I saw him and understood he could find me whenever he wanted. Police took that one seriously too. Both violations added extensions to his probation terms and additional mandatory classes. Watching him spiral should have made me feel vindicated. Instead, it just felt profoundly sad. Not sad for him specifically, but sad that our family was so fundamentally broken that physical assault was somehow less important than maintaining perfect appearances for the town. Physical healing took months. Ribs heal slowly, and every sneeze, every cough, every deep breath reminded me of that September night. Physical activities I'd always taken for granted became challenging obstacles. Sleeping required strategic pillow placement. Painting required frequent breaks. Simple tasks like carrying groceries or reaching overhead shelves triggered pain for weeks. But emotional healing took even longer. Had to process years of being systematically devalued, years of swallowing mistreatment as normal, years of accepting that my worth in my family was measured entirely by comparison to Blake's achievements and by how little trouble I caused. Started recognizing patterns I'd completely normalized. The way I'd learned to make myself invisible in group settings. The way I apologized automatically for taking up space. The way I'd convinced myself that love was supposed to hurt sometimes. That family meant enduring discomfort for some greater good that never actually materialized. Dr. Morrison became an unexpected anchor during recovery. She checked in regularly at follow-up appointments, asking not just about the ribs, but about overall well-being, emotional state, support systems. When I mentioned feeling guilty about the police report, she reminded me firmly that protecting myself wasn't betrayal. "You didn't put your brother in this situation," she said during a follow-up appointment around month 3. "He put himself there. You just refused to lie about what he did. That's not vindictive, that's honest." That reframing helped more than any medication. I hadn't destroyed Blake's future with malice. Blake had destroyed his own future the moment he decided to shove me. I'd just refused to participate in covering it up, refused to sacrifice my well-being for his convenience. Around month 6, I started rebuilding my life intentionally instead of just reacting to family chaos. Moved to a better apartment with actual natural light for painting, ground floor unit that didn't require climbing stairs while injured. Started taking my art seriously, treating it like a career instead of a hobby that embarrassed my family. Built friendships with people who valued me for who I was, not who I was related to or what I could do for them. Turns out when you're not constantly managing toxic family dynamics and absorbing their dysfunction, you suddenly have energy for your own life. Revolutionary concept that nobody had bothered explaining. Year 1 brought unexpected developments. Blake lost 2 jobs in quick succession. First one ended after he was caught screaming at a junior employee over a minor mistake, creating hostile work environment. Second one terminated him during probation period after multiple complaints about his attitude and inability to accept feedback. Anger management classes apparently weren't taking hold. Heard through Riverside's efficient grapevine that he'd moved back in with my parents permanently. 30 years old, living in his childhood bedroom, working part-time at Dad's hardware store because nobody else would hire him with his criminal record and growing reputation for volatility. Mom blamed me publicly, told anyone who'd listen that her daughter had destroyed her son's life over an accident, that I was vindictive and jealous, that I'd always resented Blake's success. The story got repeated so often it became accepted truth in certain circles. I was the vindictive daughter. Blake was the victim of my grudge. Reality didn't matter when the narrative was established. But other people saw through it. People who'd witnessed Blake's behavior over the years, who'd been on the receiving end of his temper, who'd watched him treat people badly without consequences. They reached out quietly, privately sharing their own stories of his cruelty, his volatility, his sense of entitlement. Apparently, I wasn't the only person he'd hurt, just the first one who'd reported it officially. Found out he'd shoved a girlfriend in college. She'd never pressed charges, too scared of his family's influence in her small hometown. Learned he'd been in multiple bar fights, always somehow avoided consequences because Dad knew people, had connections, made calls. Discovered a long pattern of violence that had been systematically enabled and excused for years. My report hadn't ruined an innocent man's future. It had finally documented what everyone had been quietly ignoring, what had been an open secret in certain circles. Year 2 brought closure I hadn't expected. Blake got arrested again, this time for getting physical with a bouncer at a bar in the next town over. The bouncer pressed charges without hesitation. Between Blake's existing record and probation violations, he ended up serving 4 months in county jail. Mom called me for the first time in 18 months. Not to apologize. Not to ask how I was doing. To ask if I'd write a character witness letter for Blake's sentencing hearing. Testify on his behalf, help reduce his sentence. "You're his sister," she said, voice pleading. "Your word could really help him." "I'm the sister whose ribs he broke," I replied calmly. "Why would I help him avoid consequences for his own choices?" "Because family comes first. That's what family means." "Then act like it. Then act like I'm family too." I hung up before she could respond with more manipulation. Blake served his time, got released, immediately violated probation again by contacting an ex-girlfriend who had a protective order against him. Back to jail. The cycle continued predictably. Each time, Mom found new ways to blame external factors. Bad influences, unfair system, nobody giving him a fair chance, society being too harsh on men, everything except Blake's own choices and behavior. Never once did she acknowledge that Blake's behavior was the actual problem. Never once did she take responsibility for enabling him his entire life, for teaching him that consequences didn't apply to him, for sacrificing one child to protect another. Never once did she reach out to me as anything other than a villain in her carefully constructed victim narrative. Dad stayed mostly silent. Heard he was struggling with the hardware store, Blake's legal fees draining their savings, reputation taking hits as people learned the truth about his golden son. He'd built his entire identity around having the perfect family, and watching that facade crumble publicly aged him dramatically. Saw him once at the grocery store around month 20. He looked smaller somehow, older, defeated. Our eyes met briefly across the produce section. For a moment, I thought he might approach, might finally acknowledge what had happened. Instead, he turned and walked quickly in the other direction, easier than facing what his silence had cost. Now, 2 years later, my ribs have healed completely. No pain, no limitations, no lingering physical damage except faint scars where the breaks were worst. But everything else about my life has changed fundamentally. I rent a studio apartment above an art supply shop in the nicer part of Riverside. The owner lets me use the downstairs space after hours for painting larger pieces. My work is actually selling now through small galleries, local businesses commissioning murals, corporate offices buying pieces for their lobbies. Not getting rich, but making enough to live comfortably doing work I love. Built a friend group that feels more like real family than blood relatives ever did. People who show up when they say they will. People who celebrate my successes without comparisons or conditions. People who've never once suggested I should have protected someone who hurt me for the sake of keeping up appearances. Started dating someone who treats me with basic respect and gets genuinely confused when I apologize reflexively for minor things. He's helping me unlearn all the toxic behaviors I developed to survive my family. Like it's okay to have needs. It's okay to take up space. It's okay to expect people to treat you well without having to earn it constantly. Dr. Morrison's words echo every time I doubt myself. You're safe now. And I am. Not because Blake is in jail or because my parents finally acknowledged what they did wrong. I'm safe because I chose myself when nobody else would, because I refused to participate in my own diminishment. The irony isn't lost on me. Blake, the one with the bright, guaranteed future, the golden child who could do no wrong, is currently serving his third stint in county jail after yet another assault charge. This time against a coworker who criticized his work performance. Pattern recognition apparently isn't his strong suit. Meanwhile, I'm building exactly the life I want instead of the life my family expected. Teaching art classes to kids at the community center. Showing them it's okay to make mistakes, to try new things, to exist loudly in bright colors. Everything I wasn't allowed to be growing up. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Dr. Morrison hadn't reported it. If I'd stayed quiet like Mom demanded, protected Blake's future like a good daughter should, Blake would probably still have that consulting job. Mom would still be hosting family dinners and charity events. Dad would still be proud, reputation intact. Our family would still look perfect from the outside. But I'd still be the invisible daughter painting alone in garages, still accepting crumbs of affection when they were convenient, still convinced my worth was measured by how little space I took up and how few problems I caused, still believing family meant enduring whatever they dished out because that's just how it works. Dr. Morrison didn't just report assault that day in September. She interrupted a pattern that had been firmly established since childhood. She refused to participate in the dysfunction my family had normalized and weaponized. She did what my parents should have done from the beginning, chose the person being harmed over the person doing harm. Last week, I got an unexpected message through social media. Katie, Blake's ex-girlfriend from that September night. She'd left him shortly after the arrest, moved to California, started completely fresh. She wanted to thank me. Turned out Blake had been escalating with her too. Jealous rages over minor things. Controlling behavior about who she talked to. Twice he'd grabbed her hard enough to leave bruises she'd covered with makeup. She'd been planning to leave but terrified of the fallout in small-town Riverside. My police report gave her permission to acknowledge what she'd been experiencing wasn't normal or acceptable. You saved me, she wrote. By saving yourself, you showed me I could do the same thing. That it wasn't selfish or vindictive. That it was survival. Never thought about it that way. Just thought I was surviving, protecting myself. Turns out sometimes survival inspires others facing similar situations. Blake gets out next month, fourth time, maybe it'll finally stick. Maybe he'll finally take genuine responsibility. Maybe anger management will finally work. Maybe not. Either way, it's not my problem anymore, not my responsibility to manage or predict or prevent. I don't wish him harm. Don't wish him success either. Mostly just don't think about him at all anymore. My life doesn't revolve around managing his emotions, or protecting his future, or cleaning up his messes. My life is completely mine now. My choices are mine. My future is mine. And nobody gets to shove me into counters, literal or metaphorical, without facing consequences. Mom still posts on social media about her difficult family situation. Poor Blake facing unfair circumstances. Prayers for her son going through tough times. Extended family still believes her version completely. Small town still gossips endlessly. Don't care anymore. Their opinions aren't paying my rent, or filling my days with meaning, or bringing me joy. The people who matter, the people I've deliberately chosen, know the truth. They're the family I built instead of the family I was born into. They show up consistently. They care genuinely. They celebrate my wins and support my struggles without keeping score. That's what actual family is supposed to look like. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.